Hello everyone, welcome to SVC Youth Online. My name is Sarah, if you don't know me, and I'm part of the youth team here at Sutton Vineyard. If you're new today, you're so welcome to join us in this virtual way. For everyone else, our youth, we really still miss you. It's been a long time, hasn't it? But we're just so glad we can still see so many of you through our small groups and that you can still engage in this way. We say it every week, but really, if you are not in a small group and there's even a little bit of you that thinks, maybe I'd like to try it, please do get in touch with Ben, and he would love to sort you out with getting into one that works for you. So if that's you, you can call him or text him, or you can email him at youth@suttonvineyard.org. So we're going to be looking at and continuing with our series, which is called Even Me. And this series is about how God uses ordinary people to do amazing things. And today we're going to be looking at Joseph and how amazing he was, the example that he gives us. So stay tuned for that. But before we get into the rest of our session, I'm just going to pray and then I'll explain our first game. So join with me as I pray. God, we welcome you. Thank you so much for this time when we can set aside space to listen to what you might want to say to us. Help us to have a bit of a laugh, to have our brains expanded, and to really hear you speaking to us through your word today. In your name we ask it, Jesus. Amen. Amen. So our first game for today, I think Ben and I might demonstrate this. You might see that come up and I can imagine who's going to win this one. But the game is you're going to have to clasp the hands with another person in your family, or if there's anyone else with you that you can touch hands with. And the challenge is you basically have to do a squat whilst clasping hands for as long as you can. The winner is the person who can hold that squat, that sort of seated position, for as long as they can. So just to say some of the rules, please make sure that you're not just sort of half squatting, but that you're properly down, almost like you're sitting in a seat, and see how you get on. Have fun.
Welcome back, guys. I hope you enjoyed that game. The reason that we played that maybe frustrating game was to do with waiting, because that is the theme that we're looking at today. And Jamie later on is going to speak to us about a time when Joseph had to wait. And so within that was a game about us getting to a point of wanting change, but trying to hold on as long as we could. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're not too frustrated by it. What we're going to do now is move into a time of discussion. So the questions are going to come up, and you guys just get to chat them through. Enjoy.
welcome back. We've got another game for you now where we're going to test how easy you find it going from intense activity to something a bit more calm. Now what we're going to do is take two people, so that's two of you, to compete in a 30-second burpee race. Now, if you don't know what a burpee is, pay close attention and I will attempt to demonstrate. So, start in this sort of position, arms up, go down to a squat a bit quicker than this, down to a squat, stick the feet out, do a push up, and then jump back up, like so. So a little bit quicker, like this. Start like this, down into a squat, push up, jump up, like that. So you have to do 30 seconds of that. Catch your breath, like I'm going to do now, and then adopt this pose to show a bit of calmness. Leg up like that, arms up like that. See how long you can hold that for. Good luck.
Genesis chapter 40. The cupbearer and the baker. Some time later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials, who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "Well, we both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph said to him. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favourable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Genesis 41, verse 1. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream.
Hello and welcome to Youth Online. My name's Jamie. I'm one of the youth leaders here at SVC. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. Now tonight we're going to be continuing our Even Me series, where we're looking at ordinary people in the Bible and seeing how God uses them to do extraordinary things if they hope and trust in him. And tonight we're going to be looking at a guy called Joseph. Now if you're anything like me, you'll have heard the name Joseph before. In the Bible, as the guy that had the Technicolor Dreamcoat. You'll have probably got that from the West End musical, and that's not wrong. He absolutely does have this wonderful coat knitted by his father, who's called Israel, but that's not the only cool thing about him. In fact, I'm going to kind of tell you a few things about Joseph before we get into Genesis 40 tonight, as a little bit of context before we look at this passage. You see, Joseph grew up on his father's farm, tending the flocks, harvesting crops, all of that stuff. And at 17, he started getting visions and dreams from God, which he could interpret. And we know interpretation of those dreams is a prophetic gift. So he was close to God even at that age. And one such dream actually got him on the wrong side of his brothers, because the dream that he interpreted said that his brothers and his family were going to bow down to him. And his brothers got extremely angry. So angry, in fact, that they sold him into slavery. Can you imagine that? Your own siblings selling you into slavery. Now, as it turns out, that actually comes to fruition. The vision is true. We read later in Genesis, a few chapters later. But obviously at the time they didn't know that, although Joseph did. And so his brothers sold him into slavery. Now, as a slave, he eventually ended up at the house of a man called Potiphar. And Potiphar was the captain of the king's guard. He was a pretty high-ranking dude. And the king at the time was a guy called Pharaoh. Now, Joseph was a very, very faithful man. He knew the boundaries. He wanted to stay close to God. And Potiphar had a wife who tried to sleep with Joseph. Joseph refused multiple times. He wanted to stay close to God. He knew where the boundaries lied. He wanted to respect his master, Potiphar. But Potiphar's wife plotted revenge against Joseph and lied to Potiphar, claiming that Joseph had been unfaithful and tried to sleep with her. Now, as you can imagine, Potiphar got extremely angry at this and threw him into the king's prison. Now, that's where we pick up the story in Genesis 40. So that's how he's been put in prison. And he now finds himself shortly in Genesis 40 with Pharaoh's officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, who have also been put in prison. Now, three things stand out to me in Genesis 40, which I want to talk to you briefly about tonight. You see, if I was Joseph, I'd be pretty down in prison. I would be struggling. I had been sold into slavery by my own brothers. I'd been lied about and accused of something I didn't do to a master I respected. And then I'd been thrown into the king's prison and forgotten about. And yet what we see in Genesis 40 is a very different attitude exhibited by Joseph, a very godly attitude exhibited by Joseph. And I noticed three things in this passage that I want to share with you this evening. You see, the first thing that stands out to me is very early on when the chief cupbearer and the chief baker were thrown into jail with Joseph. It says that he attends them. He serves them. Attends means he's to serve them. Even now, when he could be angry at God in a prison that he shouldn't be in, having been accused of a crime that he didn't commit, he considers himself lower than the other prisoners and he serves them. Even here, he attends to them. Secondly, he shows compassion towards the prisoners. We see him notice that they are looking dejected, and he says, "Why do you look so sad today?" Now, you and I both know Joseph has every reason to be sad himself, to just go crying in a corner, but he doesn't. Instead, not only has he served the other prisoners, he is now showing compassion towards them and asking them if they're okay. Why do you look so sad? And then thirdly, he continues to stay close to God in a time where he could run away from God, put his la-la ears on and ignore God. Instead, he uses his prophetic gifts to help the prisoners interpret their dreams. He was there for 2 years minimum, we read in the first kind of half verse of Genesis 41. 2 years minimum, most likely a lot longer. Now, that's a lot of waiting, but not once do we read that he complains or wavers from God. Not once do we read that he is shaken in his faith, that he is angry with God, that he shouts to God. He's been sold into slavery by his family, accused of a crime he didn't commit. He's been in prison for more than 2 years, and not once does he complain. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was him in that situation, I would not be that gracious. I would not be still that close to God. I would be so angry, because waiting is hard. When you don't see God working and when he's really quiet and silent, those times can be pretty lonely. And you see, I got to preach in church late last year about a situation that I found myself in last year, where I had to wait for about 4 months. I was off work due to some sickness, and I didn't know whether I was going to fly again. And for those of you that know me, know that I absolutely love my job, and it's a real passion of mine. And so to not know whether I could ever go back to work with a ridiculous problem that needed to be fixed, a sickness problem, was incredibly hard. I was incredibly anxious. I got very angry with God. I didn't really really show much compassion to other people or really serve others because I suddenly had to focus on myself, or I thought I had to focus on myself. I was absolutely terrified at the outcome, and I lost all sight of Jesus. And yet what we see here in Genesis 40 is Joseph showing a very different attitude. And now, like me, this year, you guys find yourselves in a period of waiting, where you're off school, you're not seeing friends, where it's probably starting to get a little bit difficult and boring and monotonous at home, with lack of routine, with lack of interesting things to do. And so what I want to offer you tonight, finally, is some ways in which we can make this time of waiting a little bit easier, the burden a little bit lighter, and an opportunity where we can continue to grow in our faith with God and bless and serve others. You see, if we exhibited the attitudes like Joseph, I think we'd find this time very, very different. You see, we said that throughout this, Joseph stayed close to God. Well, can you imagine what it would look like if we stayed close to God in this? If despite all the anxiety and all the craziness going on around us, we continue to center ourselves around God. We continue to attend small groups on a Sunday night, our youth small groups. And by the way, if you're not in one, please do join one. They are awesome. So you could continue in small groups, to continue praying, to take part in youth activities, to start having quiet times and reading your Bible, talking to youth leaders and asking questions to your youth leaders about faith or whatever, will all help you stay close to God. And the more opportunities you give God to move, the more he will move, the more he will speak to you. The next thing we see Joseph do is that he serves others. He attends to them. Well, we're off school or work or whatever it may be at this time, or maybe this is an opportunity in which we can start to serve others too. Joseph had prophetic gifts, spiritual gifts that he could serve others with. And I know that all of you guys have a gift given by God too. Now, some of you may not know what that is, and some of you may do. My encouragement to you is, if you don't know what that is, to ask someone what they see in you. Ask a youth leader, ask a friend what prophetic gift they see in you, or ask God to show you, because I guarantee every single one of you has something. And if you ask God to be blessed with a prophetic gift in order to love and care and support others and show people the gospel and show how real God is, I am sure he will bless you with that. And the final thing is to show compassion. Ask your friends how you're doing. Be world changers rather than playing Xbox all the time or worrying about yourself all of the time. Perhaps show compassion to some other people. Just drop them a text or drop them a phone call or FaceTime or Zoom or whatever it may be. Meet up with them in the park. Show some compassion. Say, "Why do you look so sad today?" like Joseph did. You see, if we start doing all of these things, not only will our focus shift from our own problems and our own worries and challenges and kind of mindset that we have in this time, but other people will start to be blessed by our actions and our attitudes too, just like the chief cupbearer and the chief baker were blessed by Joseph. Let me pray. Lord, I thank you for the people that tuned in tonight to listen. I thank you that they've given the opportunity to hear you speak to them. And Lord, I thank you for the young people in this time that are already going out their way to serve others, to grow their relationship with you, to show compassion to others. And Lord, I just pray that as the young people speak to you and ask you about their prophetic gifts, that you would speak to them, that you would anoint them with all kinds of spiritual blessings and prophetic gifts for them to be able to use for your glory, for other people, Lord. I pray that there might be a shift in attitude from the times of waiting at the moment, Lord, and the times of anxiety in this pandemic. There would be a shift in attitude, a shift in mindset, that our young people would be world changers, that they would set an example to the church that we want to follow. Lord, I just ask that you anoint them and you bless them in Jesus' name. Amen. Awesome, guys. Well, look, I hope you found that helpful. Please feel free to drop me a message and let me know your thoughts. And I look forward to seeing you all of you soon. Bye-bye.